Hey there, your friend Susan here, and I have a question for you. Do you feel clear? Whatever you're going through right now in your career, in your life, your business, do you feel clear? When we do not have clarity, we are out of alignment. And that's when we start saying yes to things and staying in relationships and doing business with people that really do not serve us. So, in this episode today, we're going to get into it and really talk about clarity, how to get it, how to maintain it, and some tells when you are definitely not in a place where you are supposed to be. And it's going to be absolutely awesome. And before we do, just a couple of quick announcements. So, one, if you are not subscribed to the show, hit the subscribe button. And I would love a great review. We have so many wonderful reviews. If you've left a review and this show is serving you and helping you, I am so deeply grateful. So, wherever you listen to the show, please give a great review. I would absolutely love that. Go to susansly.com. I have an insiders list. And from time to time, I do special events just for the insiders. So definitely get on the list. I promise not to spam you. We send you the new show updates. And you might be wondering, how is it, Susan, that you have built such amazing relationships? And I get asked this all the time. And one of the techniques I use is when I meet someone, I take a photo with them and get their address and send them a note card. And I do it right off my phone. It takes literally about 20 seconds. And so I use a tool called promptings. And if you go to susansly.com and hit the trusted partners tab, you will see promptings. Another insider secret I want to give you is people say, "Oh my gosh, Susan, you are so healthy. How do you maintain your health? You're traveling, you're building a business, you're a mom, you're doing all of this stuff." And my 22-year secret is isogenics. Yes, I have been doing a detox every single Monday, sometimes not for the full day, using their Cleanse for Life product. I also start my day every day with a product they have called Bia. It's got green tea, adaptogens. There's no sucralose in it, aspartame, artificial stuff, and it's amazing. It's very calming, energizing. I also use their protein, their tri-release protein. It's slow release. And as a woman in my 50s, it's so important to me to have that lean muscle and get adequate protein. So I have 2 shakes a day and I have to do one main meal and a snack. And that's how I keep myself going. And I love all their products. I even travel with them. So go to susansly.com, trusted partners, and you can find out more. So with that, we are going to get into the show. And my guest today is a best-selling author. She is an international speaker. She's a leadership trainer, and she's been featured on NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, Amazon Prime, Speak Up, as well as in Forbes magazine, CEO Mom, and Shot Callers magazine. And she is an incredible woman. And recently I was a guest on her show, and I had the privilege for this episode to bring her and flip the script. And we are going to talk about what happens when you decide that it's time for the next chapter. How do you write that chapter? How do you iterate? And being okay with saying no, which is one of the toughest things for people to do. So, my guest today is the one and only Clara Capano.
This is Raw and Real Entrepreneurship, the show that brings the no-nonsense truth of what is required to start, grow, and scale your business. I am your host, Susan Sly.
Well, Clara, you and I were chatting before coming into the show, and you said clarity is the new currency. And I was on your show, and we were talking about everything from menopause to AI and what happens when we are clear, living our best life and being out there to crush it, and then what happens when we aren't. And so just diving right in, sister, where are you at right now in this iteration of your own life with clarity?
Right. I love that you're asking this question because I think sometimes we don't acknowledge that we have different chapters, we have different versions of ourselves, and it's perfectly fine. We can't be the same person we were when we were 13 or 25, or I'm not going to be the same person when I'm 75. And, letting ourselves explore those and really embrace and celebrate them. I will say I probably have lost count, but I would say best guess is I probably am on my seventh or eighth iteration. We had the young Clara, the baby Clara, that was probably a little lost and confused. I'm the youngest of four, so I think, always trying to find my place. And the first version of me found my place in academia. So my oldest sister was the artist. My brother is the party guy. Um, the third one is the sweet one, daddy's little girl, the cheerleader. And so for me, I was going to get recognition through academics and high performance. And that's what I did. And so I dove into school, to all the AP classes, to doing those things. And, that served me for a long time until it started not to serve me, because the problem is when you try so hard to get yourself on the pedestal, it's really hard to stay on the pedestal. And you start learning that life's whole destination of life is to knock you off your pedestal. And so I think, going through that, redefining myself after college, I thought that I would go and do a traditional thing like become a lawyer. And I got into entrepreneurship. So redefining myself there and learning all the different things of doing that, becoming a mom, becoming a divorced single mom was a whole other iteration, going into leadership. And now where I'm at is as a global speaker and trainer, finally feeling in my own skin, I shall say. I think it probably happened in my 40s, feeling unapologetic for who I am, not in a mean way, but going back to what I earlier said of saying that was my path. And my past is a place of reference. It doesn't have to be a place of residency. And knowing that all of those things made me the beautifully imperfect person that I am now, and honoring myself for where I am today.
Those iterations, it's funny you mentioned 7 or 8. I was talking to my oldest daughter, Avery, and she's 28, and and she's like, Mama, I feel like you're on Susan 8.0. And I'm like, it's interesting she would say that. And when we look at the average number of career transitions a woman has gone through by the time they're in their 50s, it's about right. One of my burning questions for you, Clara, is, did you ever know you needed to pivot, but you waited a really long time?
Yes. And I did that out of fear. Well, I know I always wanted to be a speaker. I remember being a young girl and knowing my place was on stage. I didn't want to be an actress or anything, but I knew I was on stage and I knew it was all about delivering impact. However, I played small and I fed into oh, it's going to be difficult. So I told myself that that was a dream that would never happen. And so I think being that every time I went into a career, I was always trying to make it fit. And it
Mm.
just never would fit. I would try to get, a promotion. I would go and get another degree, another certification, because I was constantly trying to find that missing piece. When I finally let go, which was in my late 30s, and really leaned into the coaching, the consulting, the training, it was like, this is where I was really meant to be, and learning how to do that. But I think, sometimes it's scary. And I look at my son now who's 20, and I realize that things have changed. Society has changed the way things operate. When I was in my 20s, the path was you go to college and then you get a job. Whereas now entrepreneurship is embraced. And I can see with my son encouraging him and saying, yeah, you might need to go get a job to pay the bills, but let's build your dream. And there's no reason why you can't have it. I'm trying to take the fear out of it as much as I can so he doesn't play small. And, I think just understanding those things. And I'm also really, really working on the surrendering mindset, the idea that life happens for us, not to us. So when things fall apart, when we have to pivot, understanding that I have to just trust the process and allowing it to flow in the direction it needs to flow.
And surrender is ultimately about faith, right? It's that, okay, I know that I know that I know there's always going to be that moment of literally taking that step. And I use the example of Peter getting out of the boat, right? And for anyone who grew up in Sunday school, and they'll know, remember the story where Jesus is walking in the water and he says, "Come walk with me," right? And it's that stepping out of the boat in terror and going, okay, I'm going to step out in faith. And when we know we're going in that right direction, it's amazing how doors begin to open, the right people show up. I want to go back to something you said about leaning in, because part of the show is also around tactics. Like we have very vulnerable conversations in the show, and so many people have talked about everything from depression to going through divorce, cancer diagnosis, losing everything, and building businesses, right, in spite of it. When you leaned in, what were the very specific things you started doing?
So, great question. I think some of the things we're having to let go. And when I talk about letting go, it's letting go of relationships that were not bringing joy to my life, that were not helping me to be the best version of myself, and that can be very hard and very scary. Really focusing on living in alignment and listening to my gut and my intuition, learning not to live by the paycheck, but to live by the value. So turning away opportunities, because what I found is as I was walking towards what I knew I wanted to do, all these people kept, "Hey, do you want to come work for us? Do you want this job?" And it was really hard to turn down a six-figure income for my dream, and knowing that I had to stay the course and stay consistent. Really shrinking my circle of trust of the people that I go to who help direct me. So rather than going and talking to a lot of people, it was maybe a circle of five. And those are the ones that I really trusted with my goals, with my dreams. So when I went to them to workshop ideas, they're the ones that sort of kept me where I needed to go. And having that really helped. One of the things I did, and I just did this 18 months ago, I moved. My son graduated and I moved to a new city with really no friends, on my own, just me and the dog. And I did it because I just knew that's where I needed to be. And where some people might say, "That's crazy. How do you do that?" I had to just, like you said, have that blind faith. And I don't think you can do that. We started off the conversation by talking about clarity as the new currency. It's that clarity. When when you are clear on who it is you want to become, that becomes your checks and balances, because then every opportunity, is this going to move me towards that vision or away from my vision? And you only lean into the ones that are going to move you towards that and help you build and support that clarity.
What is your process for you personally? I mean, you coach, you speak, but what is your process for you in defining who you are in this iteration?
Mhm. So, I really think about, and sometimes I like to model it. I'll look at someone, say a Mel Robbins, and I love what she's doing. I love her style. I love her messages. I love how real she is. So I want to learn. So what I always think is start thinking of what are the goals that you have. Find people who are accomplishing those goals and learn from them. You don't need to be exactly like them. I'm never going to be Mel Robbins, but I can be Mel Robbins-esque, and I can say, okay, what were the things that she did to get her show off the ground, to get on stage, to craft a TED Talk that really opened the doors for her, to live in her authenticity, to not care what people think because she's speaking her truth. So a big thing for me has always been, it's the idea that success leaves clues. I look at the people that are living the way that I define success, the people that I would emulate, and I learn so that I can start to then piece that together so it's authentic to me.
And that's beautiful, because it's this looking at, NLP 101, it's modeling, like who is it that makes sense, and being okay with taking bits and pieces of different examples and knowing that that's okay for whoever you're incarnating into right now. And especially for women, the I personally believe sometimes we stay much longer than we need to, as you said, because it's serving us. It's
Mm.
serving a racket, a belief we have about ourselves that, for some reason it's fueling us. And then when we decide that we're finally done, then whatever doesn't serve us cannot stay. And in your coaching work, and especially for what you see, what are some tells? Like, let's get down and dirty here for people listening. What are some tells that someone is not operating with clarity? They might not, they may say, Clara, oh, I'm clear. And you're like, in your mind, you're like, oh no, sister, you are not clear. What are some tells that someone isn't clear?
Not sleeping, because when they're not sleeping, their brain is going in different directions. I think, putting yourself on the back burner, losing money or losing business. For me, what I meant is my clients, I started losing clients because I was working with the wrong clients and I wasn't showing up authentically. Um, Also, I think you have to pay attention. For me, my personal sign is avoidance. When I am out of alignment, when I am not doing well, I want to hide, meaning I want to crawl in bed and I want to pull those covers over my head and just avoiding things. So I think, again, really listening to what are the excuses that we're telling ourselves. Oh, everybody's doing this. I'm just like everybody else. But, more than anything, it's the intuition. You feel it. You feel the words coming out and you're like, that doesn't sound right. You look at yourself in the mirror and you don't recognize the reflection that's looking back at you. When you show up, you're not present. You are consistently looking for ways to get out of where you are. All of those things are big signs. You're not finding joy. The things that used to bring you joy are not bringing you joy anymore. So I
Yeah.
think those are some things to pay attention to.
Yeah, and I hope this is resonating for our global audience because I know some of y'all are just absolutely not living in integrity and you're not clear. And I'll just share there's I used to be an executive coach many years ago, and I have this girlfriend and I coach her pro bono, just to because giving. And she was not out of alignment, not out of alignment. And I kept saying, sweetheart, if you don't get in alignment and you don't get clear, the universe, who I call God, is going to force it on you. And it happened. Her husband lost his job. She's now going through a separation. All these things are happening, and she's like, "You're right." And I'm like, "There's only so much I can do. I can give you the wisdom, but if you're not going to actually execute and
Right.
do it, which is hard." And Claire, let me ask you this. I mean, you talked about, clients walking away because they weren't the right clients. You've taken many courageous leaps where you said, I am not chasing dollars. I am chasing joy. I'm chasing fulfillment. I'm chasing value. I'm chasing what it is I want. How did you personally say no to money at times and say yes to fulfillment?
Yeah. And that's a really good question. And, this goes back to, again, where are you? I love money. I don't want anybody to think that money's bad. It's just I had to redefine, because for a long time, success for me, because I put myself in that quadrant of high performance and my worth being on my title, my worth being on my bank account. And I got to a point where that was not serving me and I didn't like the person I was becoming. So it started with, and I remember hearing, it was Maria Shriver wrote this down, where she sat down and she redefined what success was for her. So I did that exercise. And for me, I redefined it. And success for me boiled down to three things. At the end of the day, did I show love? Did I inspire someone today? And did I impact the world positively? So those are how I know success. So when an opportunity comes up, I ask myself, is this going to be able to give me an opportunity to share love, to spread, joy and inspiration, and to impact the world positively? And I use that as my compass. And then I really try to take the emotion and take the facts out of it. So for example, I was offered a speaking opportunity one time, and it was going to be a really good payday. And I sat down and I looked at it and I said, okay, let's lay this out factually before you agree to say yes. It was going to be in a city that was not going to be easy for me to travel to. So I was going to have a layover and then I would have to rent a car and drive. So it was easy, full day there, full day back, and then 1 day of speaking. So it was going to take me out of commission for 3 days. Those happened to be 3 days that I shared custody with my son. So now I was going to have to be on the road and also give up time with my son. When I looked at the audience, they really were not my target audience. So even though I would go and speak and probably rock it on stage, it wasn't going to lead to residual opportunities because they weren't my target audience. So I had to ask myself, does this really make good business sense? Is this going to deliver the inspiration and the impact in the right way? Is it worth giving up time with my son? And if I chose to stay, what else could I do with those 3 days to deliver impact and create my success? And it just made better business sense for me to pass on that opportunity and to reinvest that time into the better things. And so I said no. I felt great about it because I knew I was doing the right things. And it just so happens that 2 days later, I got a call for something local I wouldn't have to travel on, and it was the exact same payday.
And there you go, right? And that's the piece. We know when we're out of alignment, we're yesaholics, saying
Mhm.
yes to things only because then we end up resenting them.
Yep.
They're not fueling us. And I love that you shared that, Clara, because right now in my inbox, I have a lot of being, as you know, since I was on your show, like, being a woman in AI, and then also, in the Phoenix market, it's like, can you be on this panel? Can you host this? And they're not paying me. And
Right.
I'm like, my time is valuable. I'm one of the top women in the world in AI. And it's like, yes, I want to serve my community, but I also want to value my time.
Right.
And
And you simply can't do it all.
no, no, you cannot do it all because it never ends well. What about people listening? They're like, she's a badass. She's got this all together. Was there ever a time when you were a bit messy?
Oh, yeah. And, I think sometimes, again, greatness comes in the messy. And, you have to, really understand because sometimes my messiness leads to my best creativity. I will say my most messy time was when I was the most out of alignment. I was after my son was born, so I was probably between the ages of about 35 and 38, struggling with postpartum, working a job that was not bringing me joy, going through a divorce, and working on that at the same time trying to recreate myself, and it was real messy. I was not at my best. I damaged relationships, I damaged my health, and those were times. But if I hadn't gone through that period of breaking down, I never would have been able to rebuild into the person that I am today. So you have to, again, realize that those things happen. And that's where I say the surrender piece. Sometimes you have to let yourself go through it. Now, messy sometimes still happens. So for me, I try to implement some things to minimize the mess, such as every week before the week starts, I have a strategy session with myself as the CEO of Clara Capano Industries. And I sit down to lay my week out so I can be more intentional. So I can try to minimize the messiness, the distractions before the week starts, and think about where I want to go. So being more regimented, being more scheduled, and understanding that a schedule brings me freedom because I get to choose where my time goes and how it's invested. And then using that definition of success as my checks and balances keeps me out of the messy, because when I start to say yes and be that yesaholic, that's when it gets messy. When I step out of my systems, when I start working out of alignment, when I start overcommitting to things that are not going to deliver impact, that's when it starts to get messy.
Yeah, and how often we do that. Me too, right? And it's the exact same thing. When I look at my schedule, when I look at my Google Calendar, and if it's full, and I just want to, and I start to feel anxiety about it, I'm like, remember, you said yes to that, right? And it's like looking in the mirror and going, calling yourself out on your
Yep,
stuff and going, wait, that's nonsense. And one of
exactly.
the things I've been doing, just because like you, there's a link to be on the show, and then I'm a CEO of a company, and it's like, so I deliberately go in and I mark out busy, busy, busy at these different times. And I've also, for me, I got crazily out of balance the beginning of this year, moving back to Phoenix, being a single mom, renovating a house, all this stuff we were talking about before the show. And I went, wait a minute. When I was making the most money, I had the most joy. I only worked 6 days a week. I did not work on the seventh day. I shut down my phone. Nothing was that important. My kids know how to reach me. And I went, Clara, I was like, oh my gosh, like, what have I been doing? And I was like the hamster on the hamster wheel because, we're doing our seed round for the company, we're growing our subscriber base, we're hiring people directly and doing all those things. And I was like, I didn't even recognize myself.
Yeah.
And
That's
I
what
think,
happens.
yeah, exactly. And thank God this, I picked up on it within 90 days as opposed to like going through a
Mhm.
couple of years of it and,
Right.
making myself sick. I love that you said the checks and balances, right? Because in your coaching work, this is a big part of that. Like, let's
Yeah.
get clarity, let's keep you in alignment, let's help you get results. There are times though when people listening are going to be, Clara, but life is happening to me and something big. Like one of my girlfriends has stage 3 ovarian cancer. Another girlfriend is very senior level at a large company.
Mhm.
She just got diagnosed with breast cancer. It spread to both breasts.
Right.
And what advice do you give
Mhm.
to men and women who
Yeah.
suddenly have something like out of left field and go, this wasn't part of the plan, right?
No. And you have to give yourself grace. And first and foremost, I'm so sorry to hear those about your friends. And these things happen. And we have to give ourselves grace. And what I try to do is to come back to, what can I do? So at the end of 2024, my father passed away. He went through a stage of dementia, and I moved to San Diego and moved in with my mom, and I have other siblings that helped as well, but I really was the one at the house. And so rather than doing things the same way that I always do, is I broke it down and said, what can I do? And I created a plan about what I could do, which was really only 2, maybe 3 hours a day. And I went to my clients and I just said, listen, this is what's happening. This is what I can do for you. And I showed up for those times, and I communicated with my family, I communicated with my team, and I just had to be honest. This is what I could do. And I think we have to give ourselves the grace. And I think what happens is we sometimes live in scarcity. I can't do those because I'm going to lose business. What I found is actually more opportunities came to me because people appreciated it. They appreciated the honesty. I had people coming out of the woodworks to support me. I had people saying, hey, do you need me to go to your house in Arizona because you're not there anymore and go water your plants for you? When you do the right things, the right people also appear in your life. So I think you just have to really take that honesty pill. And going back to the checks and balances, a lot of times what I ask myself is, when something comes up, I ask myself, if I choose to do this, what is it that I then have to say no to? Because I think, again, you have to start looking at, what is the right things to say yes to and no to. And if I'm going to say yes to this, am I not going to be able to be the person, the mom, the friend, the daughter, whatever it is that I want to be? And so I think giving yourself some grace and giving yourself the freedom to just be honest with what you can do.
Mm.
And knowing that it's just a season. Today is not your forever reality.
Yeah, which is huge. And you and I both lost our dads last year.
Mhm.
And the generation of, we have aging parents and children, and we have right now, you and I both have sons that are very close in age, and we have a generation of young men, 7 million, I believe, between the ages of 18 and 35, still living at home, still dependent, and the list goes on and on and on. There has never been precedence for this time
Yep.
in our lives
True.
ever, ever.
Mhm.
Which leads me to the next question. What is your process for setting goals for yourself?
Great
Some
question.
people set them just at the beginning of the year. Some people, you have your process on Sundays where you go into the week. But what is the process you use just to keep yourself like, this is my goal, or these are my goals, and this is how I keep myself accountable?
Absolutely. So I do an annual plan. So this usually starts in November for me, and I work and I put together a written plan.
Mm.
And it's pretty robust because it goes through, again, what is my vision? First of the vision, who do I want to become? And then my goals. And then from there, what are the activities that are going to do there? What does my schedule need to look like? Who are my clients? So I really work on getting that together. Then what I do is I use that as my roadmap. Just like if I were to jump in a car and drive from San Francisco to New York City, you got to look at it more than one time. So I do that. Then what I do is I break it down into 90-day segments. So I say, okay, if this is my annual plan for the first quarter, what do I need to do? And what does my schedule need to look like? What are the core activities? And what I do with my core activities is I usually bring it down to about 8 core activities that I need to do consistently to deliver the results. So I have my 90-day plan. When I sit down and do my weekly plan, it is based on my 90-day plan. So every Sunday I sit down and I say, okay, if these are my 90-day goals, what do I need to do this week? Are the activities, those 8 activities, are they time blocked? Are they in my schedule? Looking at those so I can stay connected with it. Then at the end of the first quarter, I do about a 3-hour half day 90-day session. I take my annual plan, I look at the last 90 days and I review what's worked, how can I amplify that? What isn't working? Why didn't it work? I then set my next 90-day goals. So I take it 90 days by 90 days, but my weeks are set up to deliver those results. The reason I like to do it 90 days is it's hard to get results under 90 days because so much of what you do today, you're not going to see the fruits of your labor for 90 days. Also, I don't want to sit there in November and be like, oh, I wish I would have done this in January. I want to reassess it. Going back to the analogy of the map and driving across country, there could be a thunderstorm, there could be road work, you might have to pivot, you might have to detour. I don't want to wait too long to do those things. So I think really bringing it down and bringing that in, and it does need to be written. And you want to be able to have that and have it written and revisit it. And then I do encourage people to get accountability, whether they hire a professional coach or even if they just get an accountability partner, someone they can check in with to say, this is what's getting accomplished. This is what's not. This is what I need help with. Somebody that's going to keep you from playing small and keep you from hiding and living in the excuses.
Yeah, I love that. And written down. And it's funny because when I was, for all the listeners, when I was on Clara's show and I said to our producer after, I'm like, oh my gosh, Clara's coming on the show because it's like we're cut from the same class. So I do a very robust written plan. It's got images in it, all of it, and I'm reviewing it. And I love what you said, there could be a thunderstorm or whatever. Last year on July 10th, when my dad passed, being an only child, and I was talking to him like on a Google Meet the day before, and he was telling me about chess club and, swimming lessons, all the things he was doing. And it rocked my world. And I made a decision to essentially push away and delay and reassess anything other than going to Canada, taking care of his estate, cleaning out things, all the things that one goes through. And the wonderful thing about it on the other side, Clara, was I revisited my plan and I went, this year I put a lot of things in that actually weren't that important. And it really forced me to pull back. I was in school, I was doing another program at MIT, and it was very rigorous. It was in the engineering school. And so other than I stopped doing my show, I stopped, other than just the very fundamentals, everything else. And then I came back and I went, after that, I went, okay, what's really important? And that, I think that forgiveness and that grace, but it's also, you and I are very driven women.
Yeah.
Are you ever too hard on yourself, do you think?
It's a blessing and a curse. And I think as I get older and I'll say as I mature on myself, I think I get kinder to myself and I try to work on that. At the same time, it is what drives me because I want to be my best. I want to give my best. I think what I've done is I've allowed myself the freedom to make mistakes and to understand it's part of the process and to take more time for reflection of, okay, I messed this up. This didn't work. Rather than beating myself up for 3 weeks, how can I reapproach it differently? And working on those and just understanding that failure is a part of the process. I will always be hard on myself because that's also what brings out my greatness. So I think, it's that fine line of you can't let it shut you down. It's got to be more of a reference point of saying, okay, this didn't work. How can we reapproach it? How can we learn from it? How can we do it better? And having that humility to stand up and be like, yeah, really screwed that thing up right there. And knowing that. And just when you live in integrity and you do that, it's just part of it.
Yeah, I love that. And it begs me to ask this last question because thinking about, the iteration of you're on now, right? And given everything, all the work you're doing, your foundation, being a mom, your business. So as we look into the future, what is version 9.0 look like for you, do you think?
So it's going to be just an elevated version of where I am now. I really want to do more global speaking. I want my show to be picked up by a platform such as a Netflix, because I want to travel the world globally and interview people on having impact, because I want the world to see there's no one way to define success, and giving people the freedom to know that they can define success and live on their terms. So I think just what I'm doing now, but just more on a global, more impactful level.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that for you. And sister, I'm holding a space for you for that vision. And I'm such a believer in the power of manifestation. And I'll share a story with you. So our producer is also our chief of staff. And so she really wants to go to London this year. And I said, well, let's manifest it. Let's just manifest that I'm asked to go speak in London, and you'll just come with me. Literally in 24 hours, I was doing a speaker prep for an event that I'm doing in Mallorca. And they said, well, we're doing an event in London in the fall. Will you come? And I called her. I said, see, just like that, within 24 hours, and holding that space. And I think that these iterations of us, especially at the pace at which technology goes, Clara, and the pace at which the world goes, they don't, and our mothers used to go through seasons based on, I'm a young woman, then I'm having children, then I'm going through menopause, and seasons were very much defined by hormones and times of their lives. And for us, an iteration could be 3 months, it could be 3 years, it doesn't matter. We get to iterate, which I think is so incredible. Well,
Yeah.
Clara, thank you so much for being on Raw and Real Entrepreneurship. And in the show notes, we'll share where everyone can reach you and all your social media. And I want to give a final word to you. I just have a sense, like, speak to that person that we talked about. That's like, Clara, I'm inspired to iterate. I'm inspired to create this next version of me. I've got a lot of stuff going on, and give them some hope.
For sure. Thank you. I think when you look at that person and you want to send them that warm emotional hug, I think just giving yourself the freedom to dream, get that clarity,
Mm.
get that vision of who it is you want to become, and walk in that vision each and every day. Because as you take a step forward, another step, it starts to become your identity. And pretty soon you'll become that person. And there's hope for you to become whoever you want. Don't rush it. Embrace the journey, trust the process, and love every step of the way.
Clara, thank you so much. And I hope whomever that was for, that you heard it. Give yourself permission to dream. So, Clara, again, thank you for being here on Raw and Real Entrepreneurship. And for everyone, wherever you are in the world, go check out our other great episodes. There are hundreds of them. And I will see you all in the next episode.